Hi, I'm Roxanne Richardson, and this is the Casual Friday podcast. In this week's podcast, I have tidbits. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Minnesota State Fair and when I'll be demonstrating. I'll give an update on my finished projects, my works in progress when it comes to knitting, and I'll talk a bit about my spinning. So let's get started. This tidbit came to me from Knit John Purl John. It's an article that he wrote on Substack, and it's available to read for free. It's about a piece of knitting. It's a knitting fragment that's 800 years old. So when you just have a piece of knitting, it's really difficult to tell sometimes just what the object was, but whether it was knit in the round or whether it was knit flat, you can't tell that. You can't usually tell anything about the knitter's knitting style, like how they actually had stitches on the needle and how they were moving them from one needle to the other, what their stitch mount was, all that. You can't tell that by looking at plain stockinette. But in this case, the fragment contains a mistake, and that mistake is a twisted stitch. And you can tell by looking at a twisted stitch how it was mounted on the needle and therefore how it got twisted, and that tells you something about the knitter's knitting style. So I will leave a link to Knit John Purl John's article down below. He references an academic article that he used in his research, and I tracked that down as well. And so I'll leave links to both of those down in the show notes. Now this tidbit is one that I just got this morning, and it's a link to a video here on YouTube that's 30 minutes long. So I haven't had time to watch the full video yet, but it's from a channel called Christine Kelly, and it's called University is what she calls it. So EWE University. She's a professor emerita, and she is an avid knitter. So this video is about French stilt knitters, which I'd never heard of, and I want to learn more about, so that this weekend I'll be watching the entire video, but I wanted to share it with you now so that you didn't have to wait a couple of weeks for me to tell you about it. So these were people who in the morning got on their very tall stilts and went out into these very marshy fields in, I believe it was southeast France, and to keep an eye on their flocks. And of course, there's a lot of boredom involved in that. And so they typically had their knitting with them. So they're standing on these stilts all day long and they're knitting. I have so many questions, and maybe she answers them in the video, like, what if they had to go to the bathroom? Or what if they wanted to eat? Or what if they just got sick of standing? Or what if they fell over? Like all of these kinds of things. But I hope I will get my answers when I watch the video, the full video. I've seen the beginning of it. But I will leave a link to that video down in the show notes. The Minnesota State Fair is coming up, and that's a huge cultural event here in Minnesota. A huge percentage of the population goes to it. Now, some people who live pretty far outside of the Twin Cities don't come. Some people in the Twin Cities don't come. Many people go multiple times. But it's a huge percentage. So depending on how you count the size of the fair, we're either the largest or the second largest. We have the most attendance per day of any state fair, while Texas has the most total attendance. Our state fair is 12 days, theirs is 21 days. They also have a population that's many times larger than ours. So it's much more of a cultural event here in Minnesota for us than it likely is for people in Texas. Now, because we're a northern climate and we're an agricultural state, the state fair has thrived since the middle of the 19th century. And the creative activities is especially interesting. We have a huge knitting culture here in Minnesota because we have a cold climate, so we need knitted items at least 6 months a year. We need to wear wool. And many of the people who migrated here descend from Northern European immigrants. So a lot of Scandinavians, Northern Germans, those types of people who had a strong knitting tradition when they came here, and they certainly didn't give it up because they needed it. So that has really been maintained here in Minnesota, and because of that, our knitting competition is enormous. I think last year they said there were 600 entries in the hand knitting competition. And that is not the only competition in which knitted items can be entered. So creative activities is this huge building. It's got things like baking and canning in it. That's one portion of it. Then there are handcrafts and needle crafts. So needle crafts are things like embroidery, knitting, crocheting, machine knitting, things like those are needle crafts. Handcrafts are things like woodworking and carving, beading, quilting, hand spun yarn, weaving, rug making, ceramics, painting on wood, painting on ceramics, I guess, all of those kinds of things. So there's an enormous amount of stuff in this one building. Last year I was recording for 2 hours, and I still hadn't gotten everything, and I was just overwhelmed at that point. I did as much as I could, but I want to do the same thing I did last year, which is to ask you what sorts of things besides the hand knitting. Very obvious, I will record all of the knitting I can find. But what other sorts of things are you interested in? Because there were things last year that people asked about. I was like, oh, I don't even know if we have that. And we did. And in some cases I could find it. In other cases, I didn't know what I was looking for, or there were just so many cases that I couldn't find it, because some of the competitions are going to be a lot smaller. And so the display case that they'll be in might share 3 or 4 other crafts in it, where knitting has enormous display cases, and a lot of the knitting will be in other display cases, like garment sewing. They'll have on mannequins, different clothing items, and then they'll put a knitted hat on one of those mannequins. And sometimes there are themed display cabinets where it might be birds and insects or dogs and cats or something like that. And so they'll have a variety of different crafts on display there that have to do with that theme. So sometimes it can be a challenge to find certain types of things, or like if you entered something, you're like, where's my mittens that I entered, because they ended up being in a booth somewhere else. But there's always like hand carved canoes in a display case. There's stained glass, there's all kinds of things. So some of the handcrafts that you might see, we have table linens, and so that might be crochet, knitted, tatted. There's hardanger, which is a Scandinavian craft that a lot of people have never heard of. But just let me know what kind of craft you want me to look for, and I'll see if I can find those. I will do my best to go and look at as many cases as I can, just in general, but just knowing from last year, it's like, it really is overwhelming. So, but let me know. Oh, I wanted to tell you when I will be demonstrating. The Weavers Guild has a huge booth, and they are there every single day of the fair. That's been true since early 1940s. They'll have a loom set up, so somebody will be there weaving, and then there'll be a spinner there, and often there's a third. There might be 2 spinners or 2 weavers, I'm not sure, but there's usually 3 people demonstrating. And then there's also a big monitor thing, because there might be some in there giving a talk. When I was demonstrating last year, there was a guy giving a talk on, I think it was growing hemp in Minnesota and trying to make that happen, and the obstacles for making that happen. So I will be there Tuesday, September 1st from 1 to 5 in the Weavers Guild booth, and that's in the Creative Activities building. It's an enormous booth. If you look around a little bit, you're not going to miss it. And then that Saturday, which I believe is September 5th, I will be there, I think, starting at 11:30. Maybe it's like 11:30 to 2, something like that. I'll put it down in the show notes when I'll confirm what the times are. But that Saturday, we're doing something special. The whole booth will be about spinning. And we'll invite people to actually come in to the booth and they can try things out. So there'll be a fiber table where people can like feel flax and hemp and different kinds of wool and to understand what they feel like. And with the wool, they can experience like hand picking it, like opening up the fibers. And then there will be a station where the drum carder is. People can will be shown and will have an opportunity to try doing drum carding. And then there will be spinners there with spindles and also spinning wheels. And you can, like, for people who don't know anything about spinning, we would just sit them down and let them understand how the treadling works and how that makes everything work. And then the person who is a spinner will be there drafting the fiber so that it doesn't break. And there'll also be a chance to see what plying is like, but using commercial yarn so that we know that that isn't going to break, and they can understand how you can take 2 strands and ply them together with the spinning wheel. So it's going to be really fun and interesting. And if you are at the State Fair either one of those days during those times that happen to be in the Creative Activities building, I will be there as well. So again, let me know what you'd like to see from the Creative Activities building, and I will do my best to film that. Last week, on I think it was Wednesday, I had to go to the dentist. I had to get a tooth taken out. I had this tooth that's been giving me trouble for years. It's been crowned, and then last winter I had a root canal, and then it got infected again. And the dentist said, I think there's probably a crack in the root that we can't see, and it's just, you know, the bone is not going to, you're going to continue having problems, you know, and he suggested a dental implant. Or at least he suggested removing the tooth, and then I could either do nothing. I could get a dental implant or I could get a bridge. And I decided on doing the dental implant. And he's a great dentist. He's going to credit me the amount of the root canal toward the implant, which is very nice. So as I was walking out of there, completely numb face, at the front desk, my dental hygienist was sitting there. And that's different than the dental assistant who helped him with the removal. And she saw me, she knows my name. She always remembers that I'm a knitter and that I have a YouTube channel. She stood up, hi Roxanne, what are you here for today? And I told her, and she was pregnant out to here. And I had just seen her maybe 3 months ago and for my cleaning, and I hadn't noticed that she was pregnant. I kind of noticed that she might be pregnant, or that maybe she had just had a baby. I wasn't sure which, because she's been having babies past few years. And she said she was due in a couple of weeks. And I was like, oh my gosh. And that she was having a girl, that she had had 2 boys already, and now she was having a girl. And so I went home feeling sorry for myself about losing a tooth, and my face was completely numb. So I started digging through my stash and looking at baby hat patterns. You know, I wanted to make something for her, but I had needed to make it quickly because she was going to have a baby any day. So I dug through my stash and I found a sport weight yarn. This is the Regi 6-ply. It's a Arnie and Carlos design line colorway. I didn't think I would ever make myself a pair of socks with these. So I thought, might as well make a hat. And I made this hat a few times years ago. It's called Aviatrix. It looks like a little women's aviator cap from the 1920s, like Amelia Earhart. And you can do it in self-striping yarn. You could do it in a gradient. You could do it in a solid or tonal. You could do it, you know, all kinds of ways. And so I thought, well, that's a cute little hat. I haven't made that in a long time. So I printed out the pattern again, and I was looking at it. So I looked at what needle size I needed, and I got things flipped around in my head because I'm an American. I'm used to seeing the US needle size listed and then in parentheses the millimeter size. And this one was done in the opposite way. because it's a European designer, and so they think in millimeter sizes, and then they give the US in parentheses. And normally that would be fine. The problem is it's in those small ranges where where you have like a 2.5 millimeter is a US 1.5, because it's between a US 1, which is 2.25, and a US 2, which is 2.75. But a US 2.5 is actually a 3 millimeter. So these things are all very close together and they're very confusing. So I got out a 2.5 millimeter and a 3 millimeter as my small needle and larger needle, and I made most of the hat, and I thought this just seems too tiny for a 6-month size. And I was looking and looking, trying to find the gauge information, because this hat can be knit in different yarn weights. And so where you find the gauge information is within each little section about the yarn weight, like what the gauge is, what needles to use, that sort of thing. And then I looked at it and then I realized, oh, I was using a 2.5 millimeter instead of a US 2.5, and that's a 3 millimeter, you know. So I needed to go up needle sizes just a little bit, but it was enough to make a difference. And so then I re-knit it, and it was, first of all, the fabric felt better. It felt, you know, looser. This did feel more like how I'd want to knit a sock, not how I'd want a baby hat to be. So I got it finished, and it just needed one little button. Now, normally I would just go into my huge stash of buttons that I've had for almost 30 years now, because I was learning to machine knit. I was designing baby sweaters because I had babies and I knew a lot of people with babies. And so I just bought up all of these little buttons for kids' sweaters. And then I stopped doing that, and I have had all these buttons. So 2 weeks ago, I donated my buttons to the Stashery, which is our local textile center, has like a reuse crafting store. And so I donated some like fabric, and I donated that I knew I wasn't going to use because I hadn't used it in 20 years. And I donated some yarn I knew I wasn't going to use, and then all this buttons, and I had this crap ton of zippers that were all exactly the same. That's a long story that I won't go into. There was literally like 100 green zippers that were this long. So I donated all of those, and then I needed a button. So I went back to the Stashery yesterday morning, and I had to buy a little card of 4 buttons. I needed one, but it was exactly the right color, exactly the right size. And so now I'm starting my new button collection. I did take a picture because I wanted to get it to her as soon as possible. I had to wait for the Stashery to be open on a day when I could go, and then I needed to take it there on a day the dentist office would be open. So I wanted to get it there yesterday, and I did. I rode my bike over there and gave it to her. She's due on Tuesday. And the office isn't open on Friday. So I think it was just in the nick of time. So I was really happy to do that. Love to knit for babies. I will show you a picture of it. I have it on a balloon, so it looks a little weird, but at least you can see what it looks like. And also, if I haven't done it already, I will put a picture of what the pattern looks like and a link down below to the pattern I use, because I do think it's very cute. And it's one of those really versatile ones because you can do so many sizes and so many different yarn weights, and different types of yarn work really well with it. Another project I've been working on is recreating a pair of socks I knit 20 years ago from some Regi 4-ply. It was this Hundertwasser collection of yarns. There were 3 sets of them. I think there's 8 colors in each one of these sets. And this is the 20th anniversary year, so they re-released, I guess is the word. They re-released the colorways, and which meant that I can replace my pair of socks, because they've gotten so worn, so thin in the soles, and I'm just not somebody who darns socks. I have so many pairs of hand knit socks, and I just feel like I just don't want to do that. I'd rather knit a new pair. And I was so happy that I could knit a new pair. And so Hundertwasser, he's a artist architect, Austrian, and he, I guess he didn't like straight lines, or there's something about him, but he has these paintings and they put them on the yarn label to show you what the inspiration is for the colorway. And they're just beautiful. They use wonderful colors. So I really like them. I think they're also re-releasing their series of rainforest colors. So I bought some of those as well, one of which will replace one of the very first pairs of socks I knit. So they don't fit great, but I always liked them as this ladybug thing, so I'll probably knit those next. When I was talking about these, I think last time somebody said, I can't believe, how do you have a pair of socks that lasts 20 years? I think there's a couple of things. One is I just don't think I'm very hard on socks. Number two is part of that is because I sit on my butt most of the day. But I've never been hard on socks. Even my commercial socks, they last and last and last and last. So for whatever it is, the way my foot is shaped inside my shoes or the way I walk, I don't know why, but they just last a long time. Another reason is that I just keep knitting socks. And so none of my socks, even if they're some of my favorites, are going to get tons and tons of wear because I have so many. I have probably 40 pairs of hand knit socks. Now there's probably a good chunk of them that I never wear these days, and I should probably get rid of them, or at least take them out of my sock drawer, but I just haven't. So maybe this fall, when it's time to start wearing wool socks again, I'll show you my sock drawer, what it looks like, and I'll cull some of them. But these I'm just very happy about. And I'm knitting them pretty much the same way I knit the first pair, which is with a regular heel flap and gusset, heel stitch and heel turn. I have a very, high heel diagonal here. So I have a very long heel diagonal. So I have a tall heel, which means I have a long gusset. And then just a regular wedge toe, like a standard. It's the very basic. It's like how I was knitting socks for a good 10 years when I was first a sock knitter. And so with these replacements, I really just wanted to recreate that. I didn't want to do anything different or knit them the way I typically, like the heel and toe I typically am knitting the past few years, because these fit great. It's just that at 10 years when I only could use this heel, I was sick of it. And so then that's when I really learned how to make fit modifications so I could use any kind of heel. And so then I've been using any kind of heel then, but not actually every heel. There are some heels that people will send to me every once in a while. I'll go, oh, that's interesting. And I should go through and methodically try some of these other heels and see how they fit my foot, just sort of using the formula, and then see if I can figure out how to modify them if I need to. That would probably be a fun thing for me. I do have one other work in progress. I have done nothing on it in the last 2 weeks. It's at exactly the same point it was back then. It's this pixelated sweater that I'm using my hand spun Falkland. And I dyed the wool, spun it, and now I'm making this sweater. I don't know why I've been stalling. I think it's that I love the yarn and the way it looks, but it's a denser yarn than I'm used to. This is a worsted spun yarn. The hand knit sweaters or the hand spun sweaters I've made so far have used woolen spun, so it's loftier, it's softer, it's more close to its commercial counterpart in terms of how it feels and how it knits. And so I just feel like, oh, it's so much denser, and that may be part of it. I might just need to suck it up and keep working. But that's been sitting on the sidelines. In the meantime, I'm like, I really want to knit a sweater. And I'm thinking, well, you have a sweater sitting on your desk. I don't want to knit that sweater. And then what I'm working on for my next hand spun sweater is the yarn. And so it's going to take a while, and I haven't figured out what I'm going to do with that sweater yet. I'm looking at the patterns that you guys have suggested. I went through all of them and kind of marked which sweaters I like. And then I have to decide, was that what I want to use this yarn that I'm spinning on? Will that yarn work with that? I don't know. So there'll be some experimenting with that going on. But otherwise, it gives me some great ideas or some things to knit with commercial yarn in the meantime while I figure out my next hand spun sweater. But I do need to kick myself in the butt and get this thing, get some traction with it. I think once it's, it's top down, which I don't love. And then for a while I was having to do stranded color work while working flat when I was shaping the neck, which I don't love. And I'm just like, oh, then it gets bigger and bigger and it's more and more stitches, which I also hate. So I just need to I think I just need to get past the armholes, and then I'll be fine. So it's just me moaning and complaining about something that I have complete control over, but refuse to acknowledge. Okay, so I've been working on this big spinning project, and I think that might be part of the stalling on my sweater, is that both are big projects, and I tend to get started on a project, and then that's the project I work on. And if I pause briefly, then it's, to knit a baby hat or to knit something little. But I don't go back and forth between large projects very well unless I've gotten to the point where I just need a long break from it. And then I'll put it to the side, and then I'll happily work on a different big project. So for Tour de Fleece, which started at the July 4th, I was working on this Shetland sweater spinning up this whole fleece, and I'm spinning it fine enough that it's taking a long time. And I'm going to end up with twice as much yarn as I actually need, which is good news, but it also meant I could have spun it a little thicker. But it means I'm going to have potentially 2 sweaters out of this, or 1 sweater and several other accessory projects. So it's a natural gray, and I'm spinning this gradient with 7 colors. And some of them are kind of hard to distinguish from each other, like going from 1 to 2 is very subtle. Going from 3 to 4 is very subtle. Once I got to all of the first 4 colors done and I looked at the yardage I had, that was when I realized I'm going to have twice as much as I need. Typically what I'm spinning is 2 skeins worth, 2 2-ounce skeins. So what I decided to do was, for color number 5, I would just spin up 2 ounces to get 1 skein right now, and then I will go to color number 6 and then just do 1 2-ounce skein for now, and then do the color number 7, which is black, and I only have a couple ounces of that. I could at least have 1 skein of every single color, and then I can go back and spin more of those others either right afterwards or give myself a little break. So I want to go to the overhead and show you the colors as they are right now, kind of some of my thinking about what I might do with these. Okay, so here are the 7 colors. So I've got 1, and I think I said this last time. In person, you can see a very slight difference between 1 and 2. And you can see the jump to 3, but 3 and 4 look pretty similar, certainly on camera. This is 5. This is ready to be wound off into 2 bobbins and then plied together. And this is 6. Where I've got 1 ounce spun. I need to spin another 1 ounce of singles in order to make a skein. And then this is the black. This is the last one. So one of the things I'm thinking of doing is maybe using 4 colors together so that there's more of a difference. And then in my other project, have 3 colors, or use each of these for different accessories. I'm even thinking about possibly over dyeing this using the same color, so getting 3 different shades of some other color with the gray undertones. So I don't know, but I'm going to have plenty of yarn, more than enough for a sweater. Well, that's it for this week's Casual Friday. If you have any comments or questions about today's video or suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, you can leave those down in the comments below, or join the discussion in my Ravelry group, Rocks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.